It was crazy. We always had the joke in our MTC district because all of us were going to Utah missions. There was me and I had 2 companions in the MTC, so I was in a trio who were going to the Utah Provo mission, as well as 4 sisters that were with us. And then there was the other 2 elders in our district were going to go to the St. George mission. So us and the sisters would always joke around that all we had to do was walk outside the MTC and we were in our mission, and that we could go out and start teaching the gospel everywhere. And so the day came, and we just had to go stand outside the MTC with all our luggage, and we were just standing there waiting. And the bus came. They had a van, a big giant van, a few of them that they came and picked us all up in, and then literally the mission president's home is 5 minutes away from the MTC. It was just right up the street. So we drove 5 minutes, stopped at the mission home, and we got out and met our mission president. My mission president was President McCune, and got out and we knocked on the door and we started singing "Call to Serve," and they welcomed us in, and we had they gave us dinner, and then they gave us the orientation. Here's what's going to happen, and then we had to and at night. Anyway, that time it was night because we'd left at like 4. We'd left from the MTC like 4 afternoon, and so we went and we got back in the vans, and they dropped us off at various members' homes around the area to so we could spend the night there. We spent the night and got up, and the next morning, and the member took us over to the this place. We called it the Bell Tower Chapel. If you drive up past the MTC, eventually the road curves, and it's that chapel just right there by the MTC. And we'd seen it every day when we would go outside to do play soccer and stuff, and we would look over there and be like, I wonder if that place is going to be important. And that's where we had all of our transfer meetings. So it was like, cool. We now know what this place is for, because none of us thought it was a church because it doesn't have a steeple, it has a bell tower. But so that's where we went, and we sat down. And our mission, and we had an interesting experience happen. Back in the MTC, we had gotten on. They have the missionary portal, and we'd gotten on the missionary portal. And for maybe about an hour, they had our first area and our trainer's name on there, which we weren't supposed to know. And so we all hopped on the missionary portal as fast as we could to figure out what area we were supposed to go to and our trainer's name. So I already knew who my trainer was going to be before I got there, but none of us told that to the mission president. And apparently the same thing had happened on the other side. So I knew my trainer was going to be a man, a guy named Devon Page, and that I was going to serve in the Freedom Spanish area because I went Spanish speaking. And as I was walking around, the trainers were there mixing and mingling. As I was walking around, I was trying to spot where this Elder Page was so I could find out who he was. And then we were sitting down and we had to do role playing where we had to practice teaching the first lesson. And our mission president was looking for an example person to help him, and he asked for an example. And this tall guy, African-American guy, just his hand shoots up in the air, and Mission was like, Elder Page, come help. And I was like, oh, that guy is huge. And that guy's my trainer. And they sat, and so they did their role-playing activity, and that's something I learned about Elder Page, is that he always volunteered for everything that mission president asked him to do. So we went, and we went and we did a role-playing exercise, and then they did the, announcements of, the mission president would stand up in front and they would announce, like, all right, this person is, and this, this person, your trainer is going to be this person. And so eventually, Elder Taylor, your trainer is going to be Elder Page, and you're serving the Freedom Spanish area. And I just, I stood up and I walked there, the average sized little, new missionary, just walking up, and my trainer, and Devon, comes up and he just gives me this big bear hug, and and I was just like, this is going to be interesting. He's a rather touchy-feely kind of guy. And he just puts his hands on my shoulder and he's like, Elder Taylor, we're going to do great work. And you remember that. And so we left. We walked outside, grabbed my luggage, and I don't remember how we got back to our area. I think the English elders in the area helped us out, but it was just such a blur that I really don't remember how we got there. Also, next thing I know, I am standing in the backyard of this member's home, looking into what would become a basement apartment. And, looking into, kind of like what you have out here. And so, it was a stairwell leading down into the back of this place. And I was like, is this where this is the place? And he's like, yeah, go inside. And I walk inside, and I was like, oh, dang. And it was like, because it was like there was a big hole in the wall that led into this giant dirt cave. And I was like, what is this, like a troll den or something? And Devon's like, oh no, it's our apartment. And I was like, why is there a giant dirt cave in my apartment? And he was like, I wasn't expecting anything like super high class, but I was like, not expecting a hole in my wall that led to a cave. And I was like, man, what did I get myself into? I'm like, am I gonna get sick in here or something? And he's like, no. And so he goes and throws my stuff down. I was like, all right, come on, we're gonna go find people to teach. And I was like, okay. So then we get out and we start walking. And I didn't remember the directions we were going or anything. And then we stopped, and eventually we ended up in a trailer park. I know where the trailer park is now, but that day I just kind of not know how we got there. So we're in this trailer park, and he goes and knocks on this door and opens up, and it's this Hispanic woman, and they start talking in Spanish, and I was like, I think I understood maybe 3 words of that. Great. Good to know the 6 weeks of the MTC paid off. And walked in. We eventually went inside, and we sat down, and we started reading scriptures with her. And and then Devon, Elder Page, turned to me and was like, why don't you share your favorite scripture? And I was like, okay. And so I turned to my favorite scripture, and I read it, and I think I kind of said in broken Spanish how it was very important to read the scriptures, and she just kind of like nodded at me, and then she turned to Elder Page and said, what did he say? And I was like, okay, that's fine. It's my first day. Then we left that apartment, and we walked outside, and we left that trailer, and we went to the next trailer over, and there was this woman who was using a broom and sweeping off the deck of her trailer. And Devon comes up and is like, hey, do you need any help? And she was like, no, not right now. And I was like, okay, good. I'm starting to understand a little bit more. And she's like, no, I don't need any help right now. And she's like, well, we can help if you want. And she's like, oh, well, if you really, really want to help, come back on Friday and I'll have something for you to do. And so I got that, and so I excitedly pulled out my planner and just wrote down on Friday and wrote down the trailer number, and it's like, cool. Fast forward 2 days. Don't remember what happened between those 2 days. It was crazy. We're just wandering around, just getting to meet people. I do remember we went and bought me a bike with this guy, Hermano Puli, is what we called him. He was an American guy who married someone from Chile and was in the ward. So I was grateful to find someone that spoke English. And so he took me and we bought me a bike. But on that Friday, we were sitting there, we were going through our planning, and then he was like, okay, so at this time we can go visit this person. Like, wait, but at this time we're supposed to be going to visit this lady and give her service. He's like, I didn't write that down. I was like, do you not remember this? This happened on my first day. And he was like, oh yeah, I do remember it, but I didn't write down where it was. Did you write down where it was? And I was like, well, I wrote down a trailer number. And he's like, do you know how many trailer parks there are in our area? I was like, I don't know. He's like, okay, we'll start at the closest trailer park and just go around until we find this woman. And we didn't find her that day. And so it was like, okay, we're fine, we're good. We didn't find her. Maybe we'll run into her later. Maybe she actually didn't want help. Maybe she's just avoiding us. But a few weeks later, we actually did find her. She was standing outside of her trailer as we were walking up this trailer park, and she points a finger at us and is like, elders, you were supposed to be at my house. And we were like, when? And Elder Page is like, I don't remember this. I was like, Elder Page, this is the woman that we met on my first day. And he's like, oh, right. And he's like, well, how can we help? And she's like, well, there's nothing you can do now. I already did it. And Elder Page was like, well, can we come in and share a message? So we went in, started sharing a message. We found out that she was actually a less active member of the church. And so we talked to her, and we started trying to convince her to come back to church. And she actually did come back to church for a few weeks, which was pretty cool. But for that first week, it was just, a lot of getting to know what everything was. Areas in the Utah Provo Mission are not very big. A Spanish area covers one ward, and I was lucky that in the stake that we were in only had 2 Spanish wards in it, which is actually pretty rare. So I covered literally I covered half of a stake. My area was literally Freedom Boulevard, like 500 West, and Center Street to like the very bottom of Provo almost. So it was not very big. It was a very small area. But most areas you cover like 2 or 3 stakes is what you cover. English elders generally work with 1 or 2 stakes, and Spanish areas have feeder stakes. So they have their home stake, and then they have 2, maybe 3 other stakes that feed into them. So you cover all of those. But I was lucky in this first area. I only have 1 because the grid system did not make sense. I was just like, I don't get. They go, how do you know if you're going north or east? And they're like, look at the mountains. Like, which mountains? There's mountains there, and there's mountains there. And they're like, look for the Y. And it's like, what if you can't see the Y? How do you know where you are? And so, figuring the grid system out, I can remember many hours that we had a map of our area, that someone had obviously just gone onto Google Photos and Google Maps and during their P-Day and printed out paper by paper a map of our area, and they put it all together and put it up on our wall. And Elder Page would be like, all right, where does Jorge live? And I was like, which Jorge? He's like, Jorge Morales. And it's like, I think he lives there. No, go down. All right, right. Okay, that's where he lives. Like, oh, okay. But, grid system, once you figure out the grid system, it's very easy. Once I knew, okay, this is what this means. Okay, it runs east to west, north to south, and by 100 increments. And once I figured that out, I could find anything. You just gave me an address and I was just able to get there, which is more than I can say back in Oregon, because in Oregon I had no sense of direction. But as long as I know the mountains are to the east, I can find anything. And so that was the big part, was just learning where everything was, and then learning the language as well. One thing that I'm very grateful that my trainer did, that Elder Page did, is he just threw me in there. Every time there was a phone call, he would hand me the phone and be like, all right, talk to them. And one time, so mad at him for this, I had to call a ward missionary for him to come with us, to a lesson and then to a meeting afterwards. And I called his cell phone, the ward missionary's cell phone, and I was like, okay, no response. And I tossed it over to Opage, and like, it's your turn, to call his wife to see if he's with his wife. And he's like, okay, picks up the phone and calls. No response. Excuse me. Throws it back to me. And I grab the phone. I look at the phone. He didn't call the wife. He just called the phone that I had just called. It's like, I know Elder Page. I just called that number. I know he wasn't going to answer. He's like, yeah, but you're never going to learn Spanish if you don't talk to people. I knew he wasn't going to answer, so you call the wife now, and now you get to talk Spanish. And I was just mad. I was just like, I can't believe you do that to me. We're supposed to take turns. We're supposed to be a team. He's like, yeah, I'm teaching you Spanish. And I was like, called the wife and eventually got a hold of the husband. And that was just one, that experience stuck out to me, because I did it to one of my trainees later on. And so that way he could learn, Spanish. But another thing that Elder Page did that I was very grateful for is every night before I went to bed, he would ask me 3 things that I'd done well. And at first, it was fine. It's like, okay, I did this. But then after a few weeks, you're just kind of like, I didn't do anything well today. Like, I wasn't able to teach this lesson. And I was just, I didn't do anything well. And so one night, I made sure to get into my bed before he got into his bed. And I was laying there, and I had my eyes closed shut. And I was like, I'm going to be asleep before he asks me that question. And so he lies in his bed, and the lights go off after he says prayers. And he says, Brother Taylor, what are 3 things you did well today? And I was like, nope, not answering. Just gonna sleep. And all of a sudden, I hear movement from his side of the room. And all of a sudden, I feel his face right in front of me. And he's like, Elder Taylor, I know you're awake. What are 3 things you did well today? And I was like, I didn't do anything well today, Elder Page. And then he took a few moments and he just said, this is all the things that I think you did well today. And that's definitely as a new missionary, that's a very important thing to remember. Is you can be super critical of yourself, but always try to find the things that you do well. That's something that I did with my trainees that later on. So I would always ask them what are things that they did well. And one of my trainees was exactly like me. I didn't do anything well at all today, Elder Taylor. And I would be like, I took a page out of Elder Page's book. And then that was not intentional pun at all, but I would, And I just told him, and it's very important to remember any time as a missionary, is that you can sometimes be super critical of yourself. And that sometimes, sometimes you set the bar higher than what the Lord expects of you. And so that's just any time in life, at any point, the Lord, say you set the bar extremely high, and then and that's something that Elder Page taught me, Devon, that you don't need to, the Lord has his bar. Don't set your bar higher than the Lord's. Now, the Lord's bar is pretty high. But oftentimes we try to set it higher, and we don't need to, because, we aren't going to be able to reach the Lord's bar in the first place. We're not perfect. That's why we have the atonement, to be able to grab, so Jesus can take our hands and help us reach that bar. And so we just got to look for the things that we did do well. And yeah, it's important to recognize what we didn't do well, but just take it and then, go with it, and fix it and make it better through the power of the atonement. I'm very grateful to Elder Page for that. I think he's taught me the most about the atonement out of everyone that I know in my life.